okay. So now, how to introduce myself? Well, first of all, I am the infinite and the eternal. So, that should be sufficient to introduce for introduction. I mean, what else do you need to know? Everything else is trivial.
Swami, someone asked me, who is your guru? I don't know who is your guru. If you are feeling...
Yes, okay. So I can talk about him. My guru is Swami Ashokananda, who was in charge of the Vedanta Society in San Francisco and in other parts of Northern California from 1931 until December 1969. And then after him came Swami Prabodhananda. I don't know if you ever met him. He may have come to North Carolina, I'm not sure.
I met him in Chicago.
Oh, met him in Chicago.
Yes, many times with Swami Prabodhananda, yes.
Yeah. So that's it. And now Swami Tattvamayananda is here as the Swami in charge. But the three centers were separated in 1969. So San Francisco, Berkeley, and Sacramento became three separate centers. So, I mean, that's all. What else should you know? I am the infinite and the eternal. And so you see, that's the same thing that you are. So you're already familiar with all that. So what is it that you want to know that you don't already know? Yeah. So now the thing is, the title was, that this from our scriptures, from the treasures from the Vedantic tradition. And so I wanted to, by the way, you can interrupt any time. There won't be any problem in that. What I want to start is with the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, certain key verses, which I think summarize the essence of what Vedanta is trying to teach, what Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Swamiji, and all the disciples and devotees have always talked about. A lot of that is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. And then the Upanishads, there are certain portions of the Katha Upanishad that are, very significant and very central. So I thought I would mention some of these, supposed to be jewels. These are our jewels. We don't have anything else to display. Some people have golden rings and diamond necklaces and whatnot. All we have is the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and the holy sayings of the great sages and the great songs that used to be sung. Those are our treasures. And so that's why I thought it would be nice to review some of this, because they tell you what Vedanta really is, because probably Vedanta, though it's very obvious when you hear about it, but it is not so obvious when you're practicing it, because the theory is so wonderful and so sublime, and the practice has to be attuned to that, so it becomes something that we can actually realize. It's not only stays as a theory. So when you try to make it practical, then you have to choose certain parts of the scriptures, because what's written in the great sayings, may appeal, some things may appeal to us more than others. Some things will really open our eyes. Oh, that's wonderful. I really appreciate this. I really understand this. This is very significant. And other things, leave us not so much moved. And so we have to pick and choose a little bit. I mean, when we're exposed to it, but we want to learn it, we try to learn all aspects of it. But when we practice it, each one of us will have a certain favorite expression to practice on, or things to remember. So, okay, what I want to start with is probably the first verse of the first of the Upanishads. That's a good place to begin. It's the beginning of the beginning. It's the Isha Upanishad is the oldest one. It is actually considered part of the main body of the Vedas, not the Upanishads, otherwise are the concluding portions. But this is considered one of the verses in the main part of the Rig Veda. So you could say this is the oldest Upanishad, and this is the first verse of that. And what it says is really the essence of the whole thing. So we don't have to go too much farther than that to understand what really Vedanta is and what our life is supposed to look like and what we're supposed to realize. And the statement is Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam. That means Isha, it's an instrumental case by the Lord, by that by a divine reality, by a divine principle. Vasyam is to be covered. What is to be covered by that? Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam, all of this. Idam, this, Sarvam, all of this is to be seen as being covered by the Lord, in the sense that a cloth that you have draped over something covers all of that. In the same sense, we should see that everything really is covered by God, by the infinite. Who is Isha? What is Isha? Isha comes from the root to control, to supervise, to be the first, to be the prime, the most important. It's the ultimate reality. Whatever that ultimate reality is, that is, everything is seen to be a manifestation of that reality. That is the heart of the Vedanta philosophy, just in that one verse alone. That everything, idam sarvam, yat kincha jagatyam jagat, whatever jagatyam, in this world, jagat moves. Whatever moves in this world, whatever appears in this world, is to be seen as covered by God. So it is definitely not some idea that, yes, you go about your regular work and your regular business 23 hours of the day, and then 1 hour a day you think of God, and that fulfills your obligation. That's not what is intended. every aspect of everything is really an aspect of divinity. That is a statement that is made, and it's a challenge for us to prove that. And it's our whole spiritual life consists in trying to make that sort of an ideal real. Everything is a perception of God. That is the statement. That means good things, bad things, wonderful things, horrible things. Anything that appears is that divine reality. How are we to understand that? I mean, if I look at something, you know, a piece of, say, a piece of food or something, I eat it and it's gone, or it's something, a piece of waste, and I throw it away. It doesn't seem like anything divine is involved in that. And when I look around at things, some things appear, yes, I can think that God might exist. I mean, yes, I can sort of feel the presence of God in this and in that. But to say that everything that comes before me, everything that I think about, everything that I see and that I touch and that I interact with in any way is a divine reality, that's going pretty far. But that's exactly what is said. Now, how are we to understand that? One of the ways of thinking about it is that if you really think about the idea of what it means to see something or hear something or sense something or think of something, everything requires two perceptions. Every sensation, every perception really is made up of two things. It's made up of something which is constantly changing or constantly changeable. And it is also made up of something which never changes. If you think about every thought and every perception, whatever you see, whatever you think of, whatever you deal with, obviously you're dealing with a changing surface. There was a time when you did not think about it, now you're thinking about it. There's a time when you did not interact with it, now you're interacting with it. There's a time when it was created, it didn't exist before, and somehow it was manufactured, and now it exists. So how can one say that there is something unchangeable here? But if you look at every perception that you have, it's admitted that the appearance, the surface of it is constantly changing. But there is something in every appearance which never changes. There is a consciousness that some things you may be conscious of this, you may be conscious of that. But consciousness itself is an unchanging reality for us. It doesn't come into existence and then go away. We may go to sleep and we may not see it for some time. But the we who are seeing and thinking and seeing and feeling continues to exist. We wake up again and the same reality is there. The consciousness within us is an unchanging thing. If you really think about it, you'll have to see that this really makes sense, that every perception is really a perception of two things, a substratum which does not change, which didn't come into existence, it always was there, It's like the screen in a movie theater. And on that screen, we sometimes see a picture of this and sometimes we see a picture of that. So that what we see on the screen is constantly changing, but the screen never changes at all. This is just an analogy, but within ourselves, the consciousness within us may be conscious of this and may be conscious of that, but the consciousness itself is an unchanging reality. It never changes. And that is the meaning of meditation. Meditation, well, there's so many techniques and you have so many objects to concentrate on and so many ways of carrying on spiritual practices. That is true, but the whole idea is to perceive that which does not change. This is the this is the challenge. Excuse me. This is the challenge that is thrown to us. We are challenged to perceive in every perception that which doesn't change. The unchangeable background. It's like the screen in a movie theater. On that screen, you can see all sorts of things. You can see a boat plying on the waters of the lake above Niagara Falls, and then the boat gets sucked into the falls and the boat seems to go over the falls and we get so terribly upset about it. But nothing is really happening at all. I mean, that it's what was happening was on a screen and we became identified with what was happening instead of remembering that it was all on a screen. So our whole life is, in a sense, like that. We're identified with what we react with. We're identified with this and that and the other. But the observer who experiences all of this is an unchangeable reality. The observed is what keeps changing. And from the observed, we get all of our happiness and all of our misery, our anxiety, our hopes, our delights, our fears. Every aspect comes from what we observe. But the observer is an unchanging reality, which is our own self. So in meditation, we concentrate on an ishtam, on a reality, a holy being, an incarnation of God, a symbol, perhaps a symbol that we have chosen, perhaps the Om. So many different methods of meditation out there, but the whole purpose of meditation is to catch hold of that which does not change, which we are prevented from seeing by all the things that go on in our lives and in our minds. And those things are good, those things are necessary, and that is not the problem. The problem is not the perception of so many things. The problem is that we don't perceive the one essential thing as well as we perceive all the things that change. So, Isha Vasya Midam Sarvam, by the Lord, all this is seen to be covered. So, at the heart of every observation is that divine reality, is that divine presence. It's called the presence of God. Now, how are we going to, what are some other ways of illustrating that? There was a great Christian saint in, I think, the 17th century. His name was Brother Lawrence. He was a monk in a Christian monastery in Paris. And he was a cook and a provider of provisions for the monastery. He had to go out and purchase whatever was needed to take care of the monks. And of course, he was in the kitchen, and in the kitchen he was, well, everybody knows what the kitchen is like. It's not exactly a place of great interior meditative consciousness. Everything is happening at once. And so in the midst of all the turmoil, and of course, they had to cook for large numbers of people. In the midst of that turmoil, he found the presence of Jesus, the presence of the divine spirit. And this was something that didn't just come and go. It was something that he felt remained. And how did he happen to get that? One day in the winter, he was looking at a large tree. Now, France, the winter is pretty cold. There'll be snow on the ground, and certainly the trees will have lost their leaves. And he saw this very large tree, bare of leaves, sitting probably against a cloudy sky, looking very forlorn and austere. And it came to his mind that he had seen that same tree in the summer, and it was full of intense life. There were leaves, masses of leaves, and there were fruits and flowers and luxuriance of birds and bees had their nests or their hives in the tree. The tree was just a mass of marvelous activity. Somehow he felt that there was that divine presence that in the winter it doesn't seem there, it doesn't seem to be apparent. But he intensely felt that in the summer that presence would be totally transfiguring the tree. So he felt that the continuity of that divine reality, the presence of God in everything, you could say. And it became such a strong perception, such a strong feeling, that it remained with him. So this is the thing, you're looking at everything around ourselves, and we see only inanimate objects and animate objects. We've got two categories. And so there'll be some animals, and there'll be some human beings, and then there'll be objects. And we think that this is the way things ought to be perceived. Of course, in a practical sense, this is the way it ought to be perceived. That's how we manage when we're driving along a road and we see a little light up there. It makes a great deal of difference if that light is red or green. We can't say that it is, it is the same. It is the same, whether it is red or green, it makes a great deal of difference. So on the surface, all these things are true. Sometimes trees are bare and sometimes trees are full of life. But there is an eternal presence in everything, whether it's actually living or non-living, whether it's moving or non-moving, there's an isness, which is given by the presence within ourselves. No, within ourselves is that divine reality. And when we look outside, we don't see that divine reality as such at first glance. But the whole point is that divine presence did not disappear just because we're not paying any attention to it. If anyone can find the divine presence or see a reality, a fundamental reality at the heart of anything, the obvious conclusion is that that reality must be at the heart of everything. So it is the presence of God everywhere. That is what our meditation is trying to achieve. And there are various steps to it. You do this, you do that. Various instructions are given. But the whole point is we want to see that reality. See, all that we see is the surface of things. And that has to change. We're not going to get any spiritual, any spiritual inspiration or any spiritual depth unless we begin to feel the presence of God everywhere and at all times. And that's not going to happen so quickly, but if it happens even for a split millimicrosecond, if it happens once to you that you feel, yes, there is a reality here, there is a presence here, then you know that it's only a matter of time and practice and things will be all right. So the thing is to have that little bit of a glance, at least a little bit of a glance. And we're not left totally at a loss, I mean, we're not left without any clue whatsoever. Anything we can think about with our heart is very helpful. In other words, feel the reality, to feel the presence of God. If you think about it and try to, intellectually comprehend it, it'll go to a certain distance, but it won't go that far. But if you can feel the presence of God, like Brother Lawrence felt the presence of Jesus, the spiritual inspiration when he looked at that tree, that there was a divine principle, there was an overpowering principle that was at work in that tree, even though it looked totally bare and forlorn in the winter with snow all around. He knew that that whole tree had within it that reality, and that reality would manifest itself on the surface also when the time came around, when the summer came around. So the whole idea is not just to see the surface of things, but to also feel the reality of something there, that God is present there. It's not something you feel through the mind so much. The mind has to be convinced in order to be able to follow these practices, that's true. But the actual feeling comes from the heart. Swami Vivekananda made this point that it is through the heart that we understand the depths of things. And it is because the mind will be able to navigate in this world and navigate us to that point. But that point really comes when we feel the existence of that reality. We feel that there is something else. Now, isn't it very strange that these Upanishads, which were written thousands of years ago, and insist on the same idea that a spiritual reality is present everywhere. nobody has ever been able to really feel that this is wrong or prove that this is wrong. And so many people, on the other hand, have been able to experience the truth of it. So if we don't experience it now, it means that we just haven't yet been able to make that live in us. But that is the point. In every perception, we're really seeing a divine reality. And it's not going to be felt through the eyes and through the mind so much. Our heart is going to react to it before the mind will. Our heart can feel these things better and more easily than the mind can figure these things out. Because the heart is able to understand something simply at a glance, but the mind needs a whole set of arguments to convince it. So, but then this is this verse, Ishavasyamidam sarvam, that by the Lord, this is all of this, idam sarvam, all of this is seen to be, has to be seen to be covered. And then it makes a number of other statements that are very, very crucial. So, for instance, it describes that reality. What is that reality that pervades everything? It is unmoving, it is one, it is faster than the mind. The senses could not overtake it since it ran ahead. Remaining stationary, it outruns all other runners. What it's trying to say in poetic language is the total universal presence of God. Everything is filled with that. There is not 1 millimicron of volume in this whole universe that is not filled with that divine reality. That is what these scriptures tell us, and it's up to us to try to verify it. So even in the good things, in the bad things, in the indifferent things, this is what we want to emphasize, that in everything, at the heart of everything, there is an essence that was never created and can never be destroyed. And it is all pervading. There's no boundary to it. There's no size to it. It is a consciousness. It is Satchit Ananda. It is an existence. It exists. It is real. Chit, it is within our consciousness. It is consciousness itself. It is that which within us is conscious. Ananda, it is blissful. Why is it that the most blissful time of our day is when we don't experience anything? The most blissful time of our day is what is called the state of deep sleep. And if we don't have deep sleep for a few days in a row, we feel absolutely terrible. But what is it that we experience in deep sleep? Nothing. I mean, we don't experience any form, we don't experience any movement, we don't experience any thoughts, ideas, hopes, aspirations, nothing. And yet without deep sleep, we feel terribly unhappy and terribly disturbed. So what is it that makes deep sleep so necessary to us? Because though it's still an ignorant state, we don't actually experience explicitly that reality, but at least we also do not experience the multiplicity. So we're one small step closer to the essence of things. And that fills us with bliss, that fills us with joy, because the essence of things, that out of which everything is made, is Satchit Ananda. It is existence, it is consciousness, it is all bliss. Within each one of us, there is a consciousness which has no limits. There is an existence, a reality which has no limits. And there is a joy that has no cause, a causeless joy. So that is within our hearts, is that reality that we're looking for. So this is the Isha Upanishad. So now then we can also talk about the Mundaka Upanishad. Mundaka Upanishad, in which this question was asked. Kasminnu bhagavo vignate sarvam idam vignatam bhavati iti. So this person approached a spiritual teacher and he said, what is that? Kasminnu bhagavo, O revered sir, what is that which, knowing which, everything becomes known? That's a wonderful question. That's a very modern question. What is it that we can know that will actually give us knowledge of everything? And we can say, well, that's a dream, you know, you can't expect such a thing to exist. But it does exist. And this teacher explained to him what this was. And he said, so he told him there were two kinds of knowledge. One kind of knowledge encompassed whatever he describes here. I can read that. And of course, this was several thousand years ago. So, you know, we can't talk about anything that would be available nowadays. But he said, there are two kinds of knowledge. The question was, what is that knowing which everything becomes known? In other words, what is the reality at the heart of everything? And he said, well, first of all, there's the lower knowledge. Two kinds of knowledge, the lower knowledge and the higher knowledge. The lower knowledge, he lists all the things that were considered the arts and sciences of his day. He mentions says Tatra Apara, the lower knowledge, Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Tharva Veda, Shiksha, Kalpo, Vyakarna, Niruktam, Chando, Jyotiramiti. In other words, he lists all the knowledges. The lower knowledge consists of the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda. In other words, all the scriptures are lower knowledge. Isn't that wonderful to hear? All the scriptures are lower knowledge. Phonetics, that means the code of pronunciation, the code of rituals. In other words, the ceremonies, the rituals, all this is lower knowledge. Grammar, etymology, metrics, astronomy. Astronomy means astrology in those days, but it means any science. All of that is the lower knowledge. Isn't that comforting? So what is the higher knowledge? The higher knowledge is Atha Para, the higher knowledge, Yaya Tat Aksharam Adhigamyate. Yaya, by means of which, the higher knowledge is that by means of which, Aksharam. Akshara means destructible, Akshara means indestructible. So it is that by which the indestructible is attained. That is the higher knowledge. So everything else you know is great and it's wonderful and it's helpful in this world, magnificent, and nobody has anything to say negatively about it. It's wonderful, but there is a higher knowledge. And that higher knowledge is that which the akshara is attained. First of all, most of us have no idea that there could be an akshara. Kshara means something which is destructible. Akshara means something which is indestructible. Can there be such a thing? All of spirituality, all of religion, and all of philosophy is really aiming at that. What is it here that does not get destroyed? Everything else here changes. It is here one day, it's not here the next day. But what is it? Is there something that never gets destroyed? Now, the Mundaka Upanishad here is telling us there is such a thing. And then, of course, the instructions, the rest of the instruction is how to approach that, and a great deal of philosophy, a great deal of spiritual instruction is given in all of our books of how to do that. But this is a new idea, that there are two experiences. And one is the experience of that which changes. That encompasses the whole of our life. And the sciences and all the marvels of modern education deal with those things. And that's wonderful. They have that role to play. It's necessary for us to manage to get along, to understand. That's wonderful. But there is another kind of knowledge. And that is the knowledge of something which never changes. Now, that's a new idea that most of us would never even think of. Oh, we definitely hear about God and we pray to God and so forth. But the idea that God represents, or God in essence, is something that is present in every perception. Pratibodha viditam, the Kena Upanishad says, in every perception that is to be seen. What is to be seen? In every perception, we see so many things that change and that were there at one time and are not there anymore, or we project that things may come in the future, they're not there now. So it's things that may come in the future, that have come in the past, that exist in the present. Every aspect of our experience is classed under this category, the changeable. And it's necessary and important, and we have to pay attention to it. And, our lives are governed by this in so many respects. Wonderful. No problem whatsoever. But there is another thing that we never normally think about. We worry so much about the changeable and how to make it better, and how to make our perception of it better, and how to attain unchangeable happiness, how to attain unchangeable conditions of so many types. But the scriptures and the spiritual teachers tell us that's very good, and you need that sort of attention for leading the normal life that we have to lead. But we are completely off base if we ignore the fact that there is another reality here. Paravidya, as the Mundaka Upanishad says, the higher knowledge. That higher knowledge is the knowledge of the unchangeable. There is here in this universe, in our experience, in our everyday life, in our minds, in our thoughts, in our consciousness, there is something unchangeable. That is our homework. That is what we have to see. The changeable, we are so efficient in. We've got sciences and engineering and, so many ways of adjusting the changeable and improving the changeable. But we never pay attention to this, that which is pervading everything that changes. Namely, at the heart of everything that changes, there is something which does not change. That is our consciousness. That is within us. That is every perception we have is a perception of the unchangeable. When you see a horse, flying by, or a jet plane or something like that, you are seeing the thing that is moving. But actually, at the heart of that movie, that scene of motion that you're watching, is your consciousness. The surface consciousness always changes, but at the base of our existence, there is a consciousness of the infinite and the eternal. And if we were not conscious of the infinite and the eternal, we would not see the finite and the temporary either. So it isn't that you can get away from the infinite and the eternal and just, I won't bother about it. It doesn't matter to me. Now I'm doing fine. You can't get away from it. It doesn't let go of you. It doesn't let go of you that easily. Until we find that reality, until we realize the existence of the unchangeable, we will be driven from one changeable condition to another. And we understand we have had so many past lives. This process will go on. How long will it go on? Until we learn our lesson. That is the thing, until we learn our lesson. There was one story which is very humorous, but I mean, it's really the essence of our spiritual practice in a way. In Italy, they have the custom that they're great lovers of opera. And when an opera singer sings an aria and she does a particularly magnificent job, and everything is just absolutely right and wonderful, and everyone is totally inspired, they expect that. So until they get that, there's a custom when there's a particularly good aria, they want to repeat it, and again, they may ask for the repetition. So this one lady, I don't know, it may not have been a lady, could have been a man too, one person was singing. And at the end of the song, at the end of the aria, in the middle of the opera, at the end of the aria, tremendous applause. Oh, wonderful. Whoa, yes, hooray, hooray. And so the singer was very much encouraged. Oh, these people are so appreciative of my singing. That's wonderful. So he sang it again. And again, tremendous applause and roaring and this and that. And he thought, oh, that's really magnificent. So he sang it a third time. And after that, again, the same applause. So he finally called out to the audience, how many times do you want me to repeat this? And then one person from the audience called out, until you learn to do it right. So like this is our life, until we learn to do it right, we're going to have to go through this, so, you don't have to follow the scriptures or follow the spiritual teachings or anything. That's fine. Nobody Nobody minds that, but you're going to be asked to sing this song again and again until you get it right. Because it is our own nature. It is part of our own being. And until we really understand what we are and who we are, then we're not going to be released from this. Once you realize that you are not this physical entity, you are not this mental entity. In other words, your physical being may be be very beautiful, or it may have certain flaws, and gee, I wish I had a little better appearance. Okay, fine. And you may be able to do so many things, but you're always wanting to do a little bit more. Oh, if I could just do this, it would be just grand. We're never really satisfied with ourselves. We would like to get more, become better at this and more, functioning better in so many different ways. And that is true, and that is fine. And there's no problem with that if we don't forget the one basic thing. Along with knowing how to deal with the changeable, we should be able to approach and deal with and absorb and become aware of and experience the reality of the unchangeable. And God is not something far away. God is not something which is far away. That's, you have to climb a high mountain to get. That reality is present. The reality of God is present in every perception. There's no time when we are not aware of the reality of God. There's no time when we don't see God. We're seeing that reality all the time. Now, a few more examples. I think if we go to the Bhagavad Gita, we can get some very nice examples. To me, the first and the last verses, first and last teaching verses, there are some introductory verses. There's a whole introductory chapter that sets the scene for the Gita. And then there's, at the end of the last teaching verse, a few more verses that go on. But the first actual teaching verse of the Gita is chapter 2, verse 12. And the Sanskrit is Natvevaham jatunasam, Natvam neme janadhipaha. So, not to, and furthermore, eva, indeed, aham, I was ever non-existent. It is not true that I was ever non-existent. See, Arjuna comes to the battle with a great sorrow that he's going to have to deal with these enemies who are really all his kith and kin. And they've been trying for a long time to obtain some sort of an understanding that would avoid this battle. But even though Sri Krishna himself tried to avoid it and the emissaries went back and forth, the Kauravas did not agree to to the restitution of rights that the Pandavas were seeking. So anyway, it had been decided that battle was the only way out. So here he is, Arjuna is facing this tremendous battle, which will be extraordinarily destructive, as everyone anticipates. So Sri Krishna is explaining, Arjuna says, I am confused. I don't know what to do. This seems to be a terrible situation to be in. What should I do? How should I don't want to do these things that appear to be necessary, which I've been preparing for a long time. And now I don't feel that this is the right thing anymore. So Sri Krishna, the whole of the Gita follows from that one question. And the first thing is that Sri Krishna tells him is, for this verse 12, it is not true that I never existed, nor you, nor all these people in these two armies that are meeting on this battlefield. Natvevaham jatu nasam. It is not true that at one time we were non-existent. Neither you, natvam neme janadhipaha. These Adhipa is emperor or king, these kings of men. It is not true that at one time we were non-existent. Na bhavishyamaha. Nor is it true that we shall all bhavishyamaha, that we shall at one point na bhavishyamaha, we shall not be in the future, we shall not exist in the future. Sarve vayam atah param, all of these hereafter. So it says, it is not true that at any time I was non-existent, nor that you were non-existent, or that these rulers of men that we are facing here on this battlefield, that they were ever non-existent. It is not true. In other words, that the people that we see around us, that they came into existence at a certain time, they were born at a certain time. And before that, they were non-existent. Sri Krishna said, it is not true that anyone was ever non-existent. Na chaivana bhavishyamaha. Nor is it true that at any time in the future we shall cease to exist. Sarve vayam atah param. Atah param means after this, all of us. This is true of all of us. This is true of everyone in the whole universe. It is not true that at one point we were all non-existent. And it is equally untrue that at some point in the future we will be non-existent. That is a strange thing to say. I mean, but on the other hand, we really don't know. We know we are present now. We know we are here now. But that we were here, that we were always present, and that we will always be present. In other words, that life is an eternal phenomenon. That is not at all obvious. Sri Krishna is telling us this, that life is an eternal phenomenon. It is not that you, at one time you are non-existent, then you were born, and at some other time you will die and you will become non-existent. That is not true. It is true of the body. The body was not there at one time. It is there now. And it's true that at some time in the future, there will come a time when it will not be there. Everybody knows that much also. But Sri Krishna is saying this is not really you. What you really are did not just come into existence and after some time will go out of existence. That is not what you really are. That's the first teaching verse of the Gita. Then the next verse is Dehinosmin yatha dehe, as in this body, dehe, dehina, this dweller in the body goes through these stages, Kaumaram, Yauvanam, Jara. He's a Kumara or Kumari. He's a youth or a boy or a girl, and then Yauvanam, a youth. And then Jara, he becomes old. It is not that there is, birth, youth, and old age. Yes, yes. So the point is, he's explaining to Arjuna that as our boyhood, youth, and old age to an embodied being in this present body, similar is the acquisition of another body. That is being so, an intelligent person is not deluded. Tatha dehantra praptir dhira satra namuhyati. The wise person is not deluded by this. So the first teaching verse tells us that which we call ourselves is a phenomenon, the surface of which is temporary, but the essence of which was never born and will never die. That is an incredible statement. Everything in our experience normally would militate against this. But this is the spiritual teaching that we are an eternal reality. That which comes into being and gets born, grows and gets old and passes away, that is like a piece of cloth. And he says later, as people change their old clothing and put on new clothing, in the same sense, the body also gets changed. So the point is that this is the essence of our spiritual teaching, that which changes is not our essence. Our essence is not how old we are or when we are born or eventually when we will pass away. Our essence is something which never changes. That is the basic principle of Vedanta. And you can see that. You can see that in the sense of that at the heart of you would not be able to see any change unless there were something unchangeable. It is impossible to see change unless there's something that changes less. This is one of Einstein's principle, actually. It's quite a modern idea as well. You would not be able to see change unless there was something which changes less or changes more. Unless change is seen relative to something, it's impossible to ascertain change at all. And the statement that is made that our essence, that is to say the Atman, the undying reality within us, has no second. Ekam eva dvitiyam brahma, neha nanasti kinchana. That's from the Kathopanishad. Ekam, one, eva advitiyam, eternally without a second. Ekam eva advitiyam brahma, that supreme reality, is only one without a second. Neha nanasti kinchana, there's no nana. Nana means multiplicity. Here, iha. In any sense, there's no multiplicity here in any sense. This is what the scriptures say. That's why we are so respectful of them, because they're able to make statements that we wouldn't dare to make. If any of us made a statement like that on our own, unless we had had a great deal of history and so forth. People were convinced, yes, what he says is absolutely true. People would be very hesitant, but we quote these scriptures because not only has it been experienced once, but it's a constant experience. Again and again throughout history, so many people have experienced that reality. Ekam eva advitiyam brahma. Ekam eva advitiyam. One indeed, advitiyam, advaita, without a second, is this Brahma, this reality. Not iha, there is not here, nana, multiplicity, variation. There's no multiplicity here. Neha nana stikinchana. In any sense, is there any multiplicity here? There's only that reality. That is the essence that we're trying to live by, trying to understand, trying to reach. So that is one thing. But before we, that of course is from the Kathopanishad, but here this, from the Gita, I want to emphasize one aspect. And that is this. In other words, we have to make this practical. We have to make this something we can realize. So the last of the we talked about the first of the teaching verses of the Gita. Now we'll talk about the last of the teaching verses of the Gita. So between these two is pure gold, but it would take untold time in order to talk about it all. But the last of the teaching verses is very well known. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarvapapebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. Okay, sarva dharman. Sarva means all dharmas. All dharmas, parityajya. Just ignore all of the other things. When the ultimate reality comes, concentrate on that alone. Sarva dharman parityajya. You've tried everything. You've tried meditation, you've tried karma yoga, you've tried bhakti yoga, raja yoga, jnana yoga, we've tried everything. Okay, so now he's giving the advice for a person who, because he's talked about all the yogas. So the idea now is, what is the summary? What is the last instruction he can give? Sarvadharman parityajya. Okay, you've had trouble attaining success in all these different yogas, in these different disciplines. Mamekam sharanam vraja. Vraja means seek. Mam ekam, seek sharana, seek refuge in me alone. Aham tva sarvapapebhyo. I, aham, twa, you, sarvapapebhyaha, sarva, that means all sins, all defects. Mokshayishyami, I shall cause you to be freed from all of those. Mokshayishyami is a causative form of the verb. I shall cause you to be free from all of these different disciplines, that you may succeed more, you may succeed less. They're all wonderful, they're all very good, they're all grand. But in the ultimate analysis, if you don't get what you're seeking, through any of these means, you're still struggling, you're still unsatisfied. Mamekam sharanam vraja. Take refuge in me alone. Me means that reality that comes to earth on occasion as different great souls. In other words, this is, of course, Mamekam in the Gita refers to Sri Krishna, but it refers to not Sri Krishna as a limited being who was born in one place, grew up in another place, and had this experience and that experience, but as the supreme reality embodied, taking refuge in that pure reality itself. What you're actually doing is immersing the finite in an infinite ocean. The finite itself, you're seeing it only as a finite reality, and it's giving you trouble. You're not able to succeed at this because of this or because of that. So you're troubled by this or troubled by that. You should do this or you should do that. This doesn't work. This works better. Oh, yes, this is wonderful. No, this is not so good. It goes up and down like that all the time. So the point is, immersing all of that, drowning all of that in that infinite glory, which is the pure and perfect and infinite reality of that divine presence, without thinking of the details, what should be done, what should not be done, what could be done, what could not be done. All of these things, just absorb yourself in that reality. Why is that? Why should one absorb oneself in that reality? Whatever we experience as that reality, whatever we are devoted to as that reality, how is it that that is going to help us? Because basically speaking, that is the purest form of what we're trying to reach. The divine principle, the divine personality, the divine beings that come to this world, they are the purest form of that. They have realized that they are in essence that. And by us absorbing ourselves in that, all of these things that he has described in these 18 chapters in the Gita become accessible to us. And the basic principle is that they are not two anyway. Advaita is the basic principle. Ekam eva dvitiyam brahma. Neha nanasti kinchana. That Brahman is one and without a second. So we're absorbing ourselves in that, but we're absorbing it in that as symbolized by these great souls who have realized that. Brahmavid, Brahmaiva bhavati, the knower of Brahman becomes Brahman, because he realizes that knower of Brahman realizes his complete identity with that. So absorbing ourselves in that is the means, is the direct means. All right, so now you can say something. Very good, very good. Okay, I've probably now, everyone is totally, what shall we say? Totally, I've silenced them all. And so they don't have any, there's no questions further. Not because there are no questions, but because I've prevented anyone from asking anything.
This is